Hello, my name is Flame. My full name is Ognian Daranov, but I use the nickname Flame. I am an aspiring writer. I moved to Luxembourg about 2 or 3 years ago, and I'm currently doing my bachelor's in English studies. And I've always been interested in poetry, but recently I've been getting into prose, and I would like to share my recent work with you. I would like to thank Jérôme Jaminet for the opportunity to be part of Literatur Livera Online. This story was written sometime in January, and as you'll see, it's about the coming of the new year and of the new decade in some ways. At height. Where do people's minds go when they get high? Not a junkie myself, but I've met many a bloke with such habits. Or perhaps they are merely inclinations. I guess repeated mistakes are a choice. But then I wonder if me returning was a choice. Smoking is an unbearable sensation. How is it possible to feel your lungs burn just by dragging on a cigarette? Worse still, who decided to commodify this experience? Some of the important people in my life smoke, but there's nothing to do about it. I wonder what the appeal is. Maybe it's a cry for help. I'm in a dark room. It can't be left behind even if I want it to be. The present cannot be felt. I'm not breathing the air around me. Light cannot reach me. Only the artificial bothers my retinas. I don't care. Where am I? Not physically, not mentally, maybe not even in life. Where do I exist? Merely in my mind? Merely in his mind? Descartes explained existence with thought, but we just live. I know a lot of people who definitely don't think, but they still exist. Baudrillard talked about finding and losing the real. How does life get better when you know everything is a simulation? Are we gonna miss the new year? We're in a hotel room at an intersection of the biggest boulevards of the city. It's my first time here. He invited me with 2 other friends to spend the night. There are only beds for 3. The streets are quiet. Nobody goes out on the last evening of the year. Only people who are crazy enough to not believe in numbers. I never think about it, but I grew up in a city of blocks and very tall apartment buildings. Every night you can see cheap lamps subduing the starlight. It's poetic how we try to create more light in the universe than there already is, surrounded by engulfing darkness. The darkness that is the world. The darkness that is, are we gonna miss the new year? It's 2343. We're obviously not going to miss the new year. Just because we're high, we won't metaphysically miss the change of the decade. Even if we died, our corpses would survive. This was naturally unfair of me. The guy who asked has a different semantic implication. His inquiry would perhaps more accurately be, at the time when the culturally perceived turn of the decade occurs, will we be attentive to this moment so as to celebratorily commemorate its happening? Theoretically, nobody is this pedantic in practice, and for good reason. At least half of all we communicate is unspoken in a matter of Suzanne tandem. It's actually disgusting how most of language is like this. Hey, look at the clock. It was 2343. Each thought was slower than the last, but not less complex or saturated. What is the speed of thought, indeed? If our thinking slows down when we're gone, how slow is our thought when we're sober? What is really fast thought? I can't speed up. They don't know I exist. They can't realize it. They can't know it. I don't know it. We have so few things to do in this world. How are you expected to pay attention? What if you spend too much time on one thing? What if you miss it like the new year? When turning my head, I involuntarily looked into his eyes. He was always beautiful, but his red whites were even more entrancing to look at. Eyes to be seen with, eyes to look at, eyes, eyes, eyes. Eyes to be bloodshot. He was weak, I was weak, we were weak. It had been 23:43 for a long time now. Whether we were going to miss the new year, I did not know. The TV screen was flashing. Mario Kart, the 8 one. He was ahead, I was ahead. He was ahead, I was ahead. He got first place, so we're even now. The alarm on his phone went off. It was now 23:50. He invited me upstairs to his apartment just a few blocks up. He lived on the 10th floor. The family had gone away for the evening, but left a lot of firecrackers and other miscellaneous explosives around. New Year's fair game, he said. Showtime. A lighter was procured from his pocket, the one he probably used to light up all those black Camels he used to secretly smoke. Come to think of it, I never asked if he stopped smoking. I watched him light up at least a dozen of those little explosives at once and just send them out into the air. The bursts were sudden, sporadic, but colorful. He quoted Harry Potter and Star Wars every time the sky was artificially lit up by his work. There was the roof of a restaurant right below us. It was closed. Nobody could get hurt, but people started watching us. He didn't care. Someone called him out to stop. He barely heard. Not that many people were out in the suburb on New Year's Day, but some sober souls were meandering. Most notably, a young mother and her child. Why were they out at midnight? By now, he stopped looking down when dropping the little sticks of dynamite. His attention was set on lighting up more and more, throwing out explosive from the balcony like they were dandelions in the spring gust, but wishing for nothing. The spectacle drew him in. I stayed to make sure he would be safe. He was still somewhat unsober. I wanted to cry. I wanted to cry because I was a little scared, because the person I saw had a strong taste for violent destruction. I reminded myself that he has a tendency towards self-destruction as well. This I knew from before, of course, but now it was alarming. I cannot save him. He cannot save me. We could have, but we cannot. I wanted to cry really hard. I wanted to bawl my eyes out like the Niagara Falls grieve every day, to extract the feeling of being lost, of powerlessness, of futility, of not belonging. I wanted in that moment to tell him to stop setting off and throwing explosive because I knew he could get hurt or get himself in trouble. I knew that eventually he could light one up and lay it at his feet. I wanted to tell him that I loved him, or that I loved him once, maybe before I left the country, maybe before I saw how eager he was to see the explosions. He was not yet a broken man, but he was breaking me. And I thought I would have done something more than the younger version of myself who just watches as life passes by, but I didn't. There was nothing to say or to do. Maybe now I know what words I had to say, but then there were none. On the streets below, the firecrackers had let out their last death rattles into the early day of the new decade.